The desert heat was merciless, baking the sand into shimmering waves that blurred the horizon. In the middle of that hellscape, a small forward operating base stood surrounded by earthen walls and barbed wire. Inside, men prepared for battle, rifles checked, radios tested, grenades counted. Among them moved Lieutenant Claire Dawson, the Navy medic. To the SEALs, she was Doc. That was the polite nickname. The less polite versions uttered under breaths or in locker room chuckles were the nurse, the band-aid, or sometimes, just a medic. She knew they respected her training, but respect in words was different from respect in combat. Claire wasn't built like them. She lacked the raw muscle and combat swagger that seemed to pour from their very pores. Her job was to keep them alive, patching bullet holes, stitching wounds, pushing morphine into broken veins. She carried a rifle, yes, but most of the team saw it as a formality. "You keep us breathing, Doc," one of the younger SEALs had once said, grinning. "But leave the killing to us." She'd smiled, masking the sting. The mission. This op was supposed to be a simple extraction: infiltrate a hostile valley, retrieve a downed drone's black box before insurgents could get their hands on it, and exfil before anyone noticed. But nothing in Afghanistan ever went simple. They were 6 hours into the mission when the ambush detonated around them. Gunfire erupted from their ridgelines, echoing like rolling thunder. The SEALs hit the dirt, returning fire instantly. RPGs slammed into the rocks, sending shrapnel sizzling across the sand. Claire dove behind a battered wall, her heart pounding like a drum. Contact left, contact right. Voices shouted through radios. Bullets cracked inches from her head, spraying dust into her eyes. She gripped her M4 tighter, reminding herself she wasn't helpless. She'd trained for this. She could fight. But when one of the SEALs went down screaming, her instincts took over. The first casualty, Petty Officer King, lay sprawled in the sand, his leg shredded by shrapnel, blood pumped in crimson arcs. Claire bolted from cover, sliding to his side. "Stay with me," she shouted, ripping open her medkit. Her hands moved with a precision born of endless drills: a tourniquet, pressure dressing, morphine injector. The world narrowed to the rhythm of his pulse beneath her fingers. Bullets whizzed overhead, but she didn't flinch. She blocked it all out until she felt King's breathing stabilize. "Up you go," she muttered to him, dragging his arm over her shoulders as she half carried, half shoved him back into cover. That should have been the end of her role. Get the wounded safe, let the SEALs fight. But fate had other plans. The turning point. The firefight intensified. The enemy wasn't just harassing you, they were swarming. Dozens of fighters poured from the ridges, firing with reckless fury. Commander Jack Rourke, the SEAL team leader, crouched behind a broken Humvee with his Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifle braced on the hood. Each shot thundered like a cannon, shredding enemies through rocks and walls. The Barrett was a monster, designed to punch through engine blocks and body armor alike. But the tide was shifting. The enemy kept advancing, and Rourke's ammo belt was running dry. Then, in a twist of cruel timing, a burst of fire raked across the Humvee. Shrapnel tore into his shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Claire sprinted to him, sliding beside his massive frame. Blood leaked between his fingers as he pressed his wound. "You're hit," she said. "Just a graze," he gritted out, though his pale face betrayed the truth. He struggled to lift the Barrett, but his arm refused to obey. For the first time in her deployments, Claire saw doubt in the SEAL commander's eyes. He looked at her, then at the Barrett, then back again. "Doc," he growled, "take the shot." The weapon. Claire froze. The Barrett, 50 calories, was nearly as tall as she was, weighing more than 30 pounds. It wasn't just a rifle, it was a beast, a symbol of battlefield dominance. No SEAL had ever offered it to her, let alone trusted her with it. "You want me to?" "No time," Rourke snapped. "You trained. I've seen you on the range. Do it." The weight of his words hit harder than any bullet. She'd qualified on sniper rifles during cross-training, but that had been years ago. Nobody had ever taken her seriously with long guns. She was just a medic, remember? But there was no room for hesitation. She grabbed the Barrett, feeling its cold steel press into her shoulder. The world around her slowed. She steadied her breathing, sighting through the massive scope. Through it, the battlefield snapped into clarity of fighters scrambling over rocks, RPG gunners lining up their shots, the chaos of a storm that needed taming. She exhaled and pulled the trigger. The first kill. The recoil nearly crushed her shoulder, but the round flew true. The RPG gunner's chest exploded, his weapon clattering harmlessly down the slope. The SEALs around her glanced in disbelief, their fire momentarily pausing. Claire didn't stop. She adjusted, fired again. Another enemy fell. Again, another body dropped. The Barrett thundered like judgment itself, echoing across the valley. The enemy's advance faltered. For every shot she fired, the SEALs surged harder, emboldened by the medic who had suddenly become their shield. The shift in respect. Holy hell, one of the SEALs muttered between bursts of fire. Doc's on the 50. They'd said it like a joke 100 times before, but now their voices carried awe. Claire ignored them. Her world narrowed to the scope. Every squeeze of the trigger wasn't just survival, it was a defiance of every doubt, every dismissal, every whispered "just a medic" she'd endured. Her body ached from the weapon's punishing kick, but she kept firing until her vision blurred and her shoulder screamed. Aftermath of fire. Finally, the ridge grew quiet. The enemy, broken and scattered, melted back into the desert shadows. The ambush was over. The SEALs regrouped, dragging ammo crates and wounded comrades into what cover remained. The air smelled of cordite and blood. Claire lowered the Barrett, her arms trembling. For a moment, she wasn't sure if she'd actually done it. Her ears rang, her shoulder throbbed, and yet there was a strange calm in her chest. Rourke, pale but grinning, clapped his uninjured hand on her back. "Hell of a shot, Doc," he rasped. "Hell of a dozen shots." The others nodded, their expressions a mix of respect and disbelief. For once, nobody called her just anything. Extraction. They didn't have time for celebration. The black box still needed retrieval, and the wounded needed evacuation. Claire split her focus between patching soldiers and helping with security. The SEALs no longer shooed her back into cover. When she moved, they moved with her. When she spoke, they listened. By the time the extraction choppers lifted them into the sky, Claire sat slumped against the cabin wall, exhaustion dragging at her eyelids. Across from her, Rourke caught her gaze and gave a nod. No words, just the quiet acknowledgement of equals. Epilogue. Weeks later, back at base, the story spread like wildfire. Every SEAL in the unit retold it with their own flair, how the medic had taken up the commander's Barrett, how she'd turned the tide with shots that echoed across the valley. Claire hated the attention, but she couldn't deny what it meant. The whispers had changed. No more just a medic. Now they called her Falcon Doc, or sometimes simply, with respect heavying their tone, shooter. But the greatest honor came one quiet evening when Rourke stopped by the medic tent. "You know," he said, his shoulder still bandaged, "you weren't supposed to fire that Barrett." She raised an eyebrow. "Regretting it, Commander?" He shook his head, a slow smile curving his lips. "Regretting I didn't hand it to you sooner." Claire laughed softly, the sound easing the scars of doubt that had once weighed her down. She wasn't just the medic anymore. She was a fighter, a protector, a SEAL in all but name. And when she closed her eyes that night, she could still feel the weight of the Barrett in her hands, and not as a burden, but as proof. Proof that in the crucible of battle, she had finally shown the truth. She was never just anything.